What we're going to talk about today is erosion, what it is, and the 4 different agents of erosion that can cause it. So again, we're doing a mind map or a concept map, and I have my paper turned landscape because that's the way my board goes. If you'd like to do yours portrait, that would be fine. I'm going to start just about in the center of the page for this one with a title, and of course, I already told you we're talking about erosion, so that's what the title's going to be. We'll put a short definition here along with it. Erosion is the movement of weathered rock. So the rock has already been broken down into pieces, and erosion is just the part where it's getting carried away. Erosion is the movement of weathered rock. There are 4 agents of erosion, and we'll try to put one kind of off each corner here. So the first one, the first agent or the first thing that can cause erosion is wind. Wind can move small particles against gravity. It can pick up small particles and move them uphill, is what that means. But it is very limited by the size of the particles that it can pick up, generally no bigger than sand-sized particles. This was one of the huge issues with creating the Dust Bowl. They had overplowed the fields and left all that topsoil exposed. Very fine particles in the soil got picked up by the wind and carried away, making those huge dust storms that it talked about in the Dust Bowl video that we watched. Generally though, wind erosion is mostly a problem for environments that are desert-like. They don't have a lot of vegetation to hold the soil down, and so you can get those small particles being picked up and carried away. The second agent of erosion, and again, we'll label that that's an agent. These are the things that cause erosion, is water. There are 2 ways that water can cause erosion. One is through wave action. And of course, this would have to be along a shoreline, generally oceans, where you can get erosion forming cliffs and things like arches. If you've ever been up to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, there's a, what's it called, National Pictured Rocks Lakeshore, I believe, something like that, where they have lots of beautiful cliffs and arches and formations, and you can take a boat tour and go out and see them. The second way that wave action can cause erosion is kind of more the result of it, or the result of part of wave action, which would be deposition, the depositing of those particles, which would form things like sandbars and barrier islands. Barrier islands are those islands that are just offshore, and they're formed by waves depositing small particles over time. The second way that water can cause erosion, we're a little more familiar with here in the Midwest, would be through rivers and streams. And we'll add waterfalls to that, although there's certainly not as many of those. There are two categories of river and stream erosion, and it has to do with the channel that they create. There's gully erosion, which is what it's called when you get a very large channel forming where the water has been. And the smaller one is called rill erosion, where you have small channels forming where the water has been. Okay, there are two other agents of erosion, two other things that can cause erosion. This next one is pretty simple. Gravity, all by itself, can cause erosion because rocks that are in high places tend to fall. I'm having trouble with my spelling today. High elevation rocks can fall. And what's interesting about this agent is that gravity is the agent that drives two of the other agents of erosion. In other words, it's the mechanism or the reason behind water erosion. Water's got to flow downhill. And then, as we'll add, it is also the driving force behind glacial ice erosion. Which leads us to our last agent of erosion. Something we used to have a lot of here, not so much anymore, glacial ice. Glaciers, in other words. Typically now you only find glaciers in polar regions or high elevations. Like in Montana's Glacier National Park, that'd be a high elevation. And just in case we don't know what glaciers are, they are enormous rivers of slowly flowing ice. And it flows downhill according to gravity. So you have lots of ice that the weight of it will cause it to flow very, very slowly, maybe down the side of a mountain or downhill. Glacial ice is what's responsible for much of the landscape in the Midwest. And in fact, you can still see remnants of the things that were carried by glacial ice, including large boulders, especially up around Chicago. If you are driving across the prairie and all of a sudden there's just a large boulder that doesn't seem to belong there, chances are it was dropped by a glacier many thousands of years ago. Okay, that should do it for today.